Good Thursday evening. I'm Chief Meteorologist Emily Walls with Fox 32 Chicago, and we have a lot to discuss in the weather department, not just because we're approaching a holiday weekend, but because NOAA released their 2025 predictions for the hurricane season in the Atlantic Basin. So we have a lot to cover here tonight. Let's get right to it. First, I want to tell you about what those predictions are and also compare this forecasted hurricane season to what we experienced last year in 2024. So take a look at these stats here. This is what NOAA is predicting for the 2025 season. We're just getting going with hurricane season beginning on June 1st, so it's kind of knocking on the doorstep. We're getting very close to that, and that's going to run through November 30th. That is the defined hurricane season, June 1st to November 30th. And NOAA is predicting 13 to 19 named storms. But if you notice on the line below that the average is 14, so what they're suggesting is that we could have a near average year, if not an above average count of named storms. And that's going to include things like tropical storms as well as your hurricanes. So anything that is a named storm. So again, it could be either of those categories, but 6 to 10 hurricanes have been predicted. Average is 7. And if we compare that back to what we had in 2024, we had 11 hurricanes last year in the Atlantic Basin. So it was a very active year, much higher than average. But this year it's looking like we could be in that same range potentially. And NOAA is also forecasting 3 to 5 major hurricanes. But what does that mean? What is a major hurricane? It's a category 3 or higher. So hurricanes, they're basically ranked on something that's called the Saffir-Simpson scale, and it's just a wind scale. So a category 3 hurricane, that begins at 111 miles per hour. So whenever you reach that threshold, you now have a category 3 hurricane. And then, of course, that goes all the way up to a category 5. Last year, we had multiple category 5 hurricanes. So it was a very busy year in 2024 with 5 major hurricanes across the Atlantic Basin. This year, looking like we could potentially be in that same exact range. So that's the official numbers, the official forecast coming from NOAA about this coming season. But let's dive in a little bit deeper about hurricane season, because it's something that, here in the Midwest, we don't have to really deal with all that often. So a lot of this stuff, it may feel like new information to you. So again, hurricane season, it runs from June 1st to November 30th. But of course, outside of that time range, you can still have a tropical storm that develops. But take a look at this map here. What this is showing is that they're most common, the peak of the season comes in September. And why is that? Well, it comes down to several factors, but the biggest factor comes down to sea surface temperatures. So in order to sustain a hurricane, you need a sea surface temperature of right around 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So as the waters begin to warm throughout the summertime, it's really not until mid to late summer that we see those sea surface temperatures rising into the 80s, if not close to the 90s, especially close to land, where we see those sea surface temperatures really, really heating up late in the year. But keep in mind that it takes the water so much longer to heat up than it does the air. So this is why we see the peak of hurricane season later in the season, closer to August, September, and then right on into October. Here's the list of the names that are on the list for the Atlantic Basin. So it's going to start with Andrea. That's going to be our first named storm. But what I wanted to draw your attention to was the D name, which is now Dexter. That's new, because this particular list, they're recycled every about 6 years. And all of these names, they come from the World Meteorological Organization. So this is a rotating list. So back in 2019, we had Hurricane Dorian. And if you remember, that was a very strong hurricane, a catastrophic hurricane that caused a lot of damage over the Bahamas. So whenever that happens, if a hurricane happens to be catastrophic, where it's either very expensive in the amount of damage that it causes, or if the fatalities are really high, that particular name will be retired by the World Meteorological Organization. So Dorian was officially retired and has now been replaced by the name Dexter. But again, we are still kind of waiting on the first go around, right? We haven't had any named storms so far, but likely in the next month or so, we're probably going to see tropical storms developing, and then those will, of course, be named. First one up is going to be Andrea. Let's change gears here, talk a little bit about temperatures. I think everybody, especially across the northern half of the U.S., really wondering, when are we going to be warming up? And we still have a ways to get through. It has not been feeling like late spring across a good portion of the area, but the southern half of the continental United States, It has been a scorcher. It's been very hot. Notice locations close to LA right now, 102 degrees. We're in the upper 90s across southern Texas. And all of that heat, it has really been contributing to drought conditions, which we did just get the latest drought monitor this morning. That comes out every Thursday. And I'm going to show you that in just a few moments. But it does look like things have actually worsened in many portions of the United States when it comes to how much water we've received, which has not been a lot. So looking ahead for the next 3 days, if you compare this to the temperature map that I was just showing you, you'll notice this cooler air is represented by this pink shading as well as the blue shading on this map. And over the next couple of days, it's really not going to change all that much. So those below average conditions that we've been experiencing, not just in the Midwest, but the Great Lakes region, out east, also across the north and northwest, that's going to stay in place for the next couple of days. This is look at Saturday. So going into Memorial Day weekend, temperatures across the northern half of the U.S. likely going to remain below average. However, I think we have some pretty good news heading our way going into the month of June. We're really going to start to see some improvements with the temperatures with a little bit of a pattern flip-flop. So for those of us that have been dealing with very dry conditions, we're going to see a wetter pattern developing across the southern half of the U.S., which, by the way, is wonderful news because this latest drought monitor, I'm sure your eyes are already kind of being drawn to all of the red shading that you're seeing here across the southern and the southwestern U.S. This area has expanded since the latest update. So again, new data comes out every Thursday, and now we have extreme and exceptional drought listed for locations all the way into the Vegas area to Southern California, over into Arizona, New Mexico, and then throughout Texas as well, all the way over to Austin, now showing exceptional drought. And unfortunately, in the near term, we're not going to see much in the way of rain, but in the next couple of weeks, again, when I was talking about that pattern flip, we could potentially be trending a little bit wetter across the south and southwest. Now, focusing in on the Great Lakes region, we are now seeing a moderate drought across a good portion of the Chicagoland area for locations closer to Michigan, the Saginaw Bay region, in a severe drought still. So not a lot of improvements there. However, this pesky low pressure system that we've been dealing with for the last couple of days, it's really going to continue to bring some rain, especially in places like Michigan. But in the Chicago area, we're finally starting to see that loosening its grips. Satellite and radar, things are fairly quiet in most locations, but you can see down in Texas, Oklahoma this evening, we have a batch of severe thunderstorms. We've had a couple tornado warnings coming out of this, and that severe thunderstorm watch is going to remain in effect until about 10 p.m. So some portions of the area very active this evening, and then tomorrow pretty much the same area could be under the gun for some more storms to develop. Strong to severe storms are going to be possible on Friday, especially in this highlighted area that you see in yellow. So let's turn the page here to the next 3 days as far as precipitation goes. This is what we're dealing with. So we have that low pressure system that's been impacting the Great Lakes area. That's now taking off toward the east, but it's going to gain some steam here. So we're going to be very gusty going into Memorial Day weekend for those of you that may have travel plans taking you to the northeast. So look out for that. Could be impacting flights a little bit. And then, of course, we do still have that storm potential across the south. That's going to be on Friday and then right on into the weekend as well. Locally, here in the Chicago area, we tapped out at 56 degrees today. Average is 73. So we were way below average, and it's going to stay that way for the next couple of days. So we're in the 60s going into this upcoming weekend, and it's not until the middle portion to the latter half of next week that we start to see temperatures rising back up into the 70s and 80s. So below average for another week. And then finally, as we go into the month of June, I think we're going to start to see some big improvements, and it should start to feel a little more summer-like. Tonight's going to be a cold one. So over the last couple of hours here in Chicago, we've been noticing decreasing cloud cover. And with the lack of cloud cover, that typically allows more heat to escape. It kind of acts as a blanket during the overnight hours. Well, we're not going to have that tonight. So skies are going to become partly cloudy. Temperatures are going to plummet into the lower 40s. So it's going to be chilly when we wake up tomorrow, but fortunately, we are going to be warming up into the 60s during the afternoon. If we take a look at the next couple of days, especially for Memorial Day weekend, if you have outdoor plans, things look pleasant. It's going to be comfortable outside. We're going to be in the lower 60s, but rain is possible early next week. I will show you your full 7-day forecast coming up on the news at 9. We'll hope to see you there.